The message from the void, a cold silence spread across the command room as the signal played again from deep space. It came not in words but in images and pulses, a warning, a threat, a declaration of war. The Varn had spoken. They were not creatures of peace. They had no songs or stories of friendship. They only believed in power and fear. They conquered worlds through destruction. They ruled minds through terror. The message showed burning cities on distant planets. It showed bodies falling in clouds of smoke. It showed surrender, followed by chains. Then it showed Earth blue and beautiful, marked as next. Leaders of Earth gathered in one chamber far beneath the surface. Screens glowed around them, showing faces from every continent. Some wanted to talk, some wanted to hide, some whispered fear. One voice cut through the noise. His name was Commander Reed. He stood tall in his black uniform without blinking. His voice was calm like steel. They want us afraid. They want us broken. But they forgot who we are. The room grew quiet. All eyes turned to him. He stepped forward and pointed to the image of Earth. We do not bend. We do not break. We do not negotiate with those who burn innocent lives outside the chamber. The world listened. The message from the Varn was broadcast across every network. People stopped in streets. Children watched in silence. Soldiers sharpened blades without speaking. Then came the second blow. Europa Outpost 4 stopped sending reports. The last message was short. No light, no sound. Then nothing. A probe was sent to investigate. What it found made blood run cold. The entire station was gone. Not damaged, not broken. Gone. Like it had never been built. Families mourned. Citizens cried. The Varn laughed across the stars. Humanity answered with fire. Commander Reed was given full control of Earth's defense fleet. He did not wear medals. He did not make speeches. He simply prepared. He called together the best pilots, the best minds, the bravest fighters. No speeches, only a single order. We fight on Mars. Shipyards ran day and night. Engineers turned mining vessels into war cruisers. On Luna, families trained with medics and soldiers. On Earth, students built drones and coded defense grids. The Varn believed terror would stop them. Instead, terror united them. Reed's first target was a Varn listening station orbiting a dead planet. A small target. A warning back. He sent 3 ships under silent drive. They reached the station in 6 hours. The battle lasted 15 minutes. Human ships tore through Varn armor with precision. No prisoners, no broadcasts, only silence. Humanity sent one message in return, a pulse transmission. Translated into 100 languages. No surrender, no fear. We are coming. The galaxy stirred. Other species watched with surprise. The Varn had crushed 20 civilizations. They had turned empires into dust. But now one small blue planet had said noon. The edge of the solar system, another outpost, picked up a strange signal. Not Varn, not human, a whisper from a species long thought gone. They had once resisted but fell within days. The signal was clear. Hope inside his warship. Reed read the reports. He marked star maps with new paths. He studied Varn language patterns. He slept only 2 hours each night. People asked him what he felt. He answered with truth. They killed our people. They erased our sky stations. They believe we are like the others. They are wrong. In the dark corridors of the Varn command center, another voice spoke. It was cold and tall and covered in armor. It watched human responses with growing interest. One of the Varn generals turned to its leader and hissed, "They resist harder than we calculated." The leader answered without looking, "That will change." But it did not change. In fact, it only began. The human fleet grew faster, stronger, more prepared. Earth was no longer a target. Earth was a hunter, and in the silence between the stars, terror began to fade, not from the hearts of humans, but from the hands of those who tried to use it, because they did not understand one truth. A truth now whispered across comets and cold moons. A truth painted in fire on broken stations. Terror fails when faced with humanity. Strike the flame. The stars above Mars glowed red as human ships launched one after another. Engines roared in silence across space as steel giants moved into perfect formation. Inside the lead cruiser, Commander Reed stood before a large window, his hands behind his back, his eyes sharp as stone. The war had started and now came. The answer not in words but in fire. Across the galaxy the Varn grew restless. Their methods had worked on every species before. One attack, one show of destruction, one wave of fear. That was enough to break them, but humans did not break, humans bled. Humans burned. Then humans Rosereed had chosen a Varn fuel relay as the next target, a massive structure floating near a gas giant. It powered 10 Varn fleets and supplied weapons to 3 conquered systems. Destroying it would be more than a strike. It would be a symbol. He gathered his team in the war room. Around the table stood pilots with scars, engineers with fire in their eyes, and soldiers who had lost family in the Europa. Massacre Reed pointed at the hologram spinning above the table. This is where they feel safe. That ends now. No one spoke. They only nodded and walked out to prepare. Ships were armed with rail cannons, fighters were loaded with silent missiles, drones were programmed to jam Varn's sensors when the fleet dropped out of warp. The fuel relay stood like a sleeping beast, surrounded by small guard ships. The humans moved in a perfect circle, fast, silent, unseen. Then came the first shot. A rail slug pierced the relay's outer shell and set off a chain reaction within. Seconds, fire spread across the structure. Varn ships rushed to respond, but they were too late. Human ships were already behind them, one by one. Varn vessels exploded into flames without even returning fire. In 12 minutes it was over. The fuel relay shattered into pieces, floating like dead bones in space. The humans turned back. Not a single loss across the stars. The message spread. The Varn had been struck again, this time harder, and still the humans did not speak in fear. They spoke in actions. On Earth the news reached the people like fire through dry grass. Crowds filled the streets, not in panic, but in pride. Factories worked without rest. Schools added combat strategy to their lessons. Doctors trained in battlefield care. Even artists painted war posters with bold colors and louder messages. One of the most shared posters showed a Varn soldier looking into a human child's eyes. The words below read, "You cannot scare the future." Back in space, the Varn leaders met inside their dark chamber. Their voices were sharp like blades. One shouted that humans were unstable. Another claimed they had stolen technology. The oldest among them remained quiet, then spoke. "Fear is not working. We must remind them who rules this galaxy." The plan was cruel. They targeted a civilian convoy carrying settlers and aid supplies to Saturn's outer colonies. No defense, no weapons, only families and doctors and engineers. Attack came fast. Varn fighters struck without warning. 3 ships destroyed dozens. Dead, smoke, and silence. But the plan failed again. Humanity did not kneel. Instead, the survivors broadcasted a single message to all corners of space. "We are not afraid. We are building faster than you can destroy. You hit us once, we come back tenfold. We do not forget." Within days, the convoy's surviving ships were rebuilt. Volunteers signed up in thousands. Cargo haulers were reinforced with armor. Even grandmothers welded plates to hulls with steady hands. One civilian engineer named Tom wired an old mining drone into a defense turret. His work saved an entire ship during the next surprise raid. When asked why he fought, he smiled and said, "Because I still have breath." Commander Reed watched these reports with silent pride. He knew this was more than war now. This was transformation. We are no longer defending, we are rising. They thought fear was a wall. "We made it a bridge." He ordered his next mission to a captured mining colony, used by the Varn to extract rare minerals. Human intel had learned that many of the workers were enslaved species forced into labor. Reed's fleet entered the zone with precision. Varn guards were taken out one by one. The gates were blown open, and for the first time in years the prisoners saw hope flying. On human banners among them was a young alien named They, thin and bruised with eyes like liquid glass. He looked at the human soldiers and asked in a broken voice, "You are not afraid of Thema?" Medic lifted him gently and answered, "No, we fight because we are human." Reed stood before the rescued workers and made a short statement recorded by thousands. "We are not saviors. We are not heroes. We are the proof that fear can be defeated. You can rise too. The Varn began to feel something new, not anger, not pride, something worse, uncertainty. Their terror was not working, their enemies were not shrinking. They were multiplying. Even Varn-controlled worlds began whispering the name of Earth. Like a spark in dry leaves, the human coalition received messages from planets that had once given up. Now they asked for guidance, for support, for fire, and the humans answered with fleets, with food, with courage. In the blackness of space where only silence once ruled, now echoed a new rhythm, a rhythm of movement, a rhythm of resistance, and in every corner where fear once lived, now lived fire, now lived hope, now lived the memory of those who stood even after the sky fell, because in the war of terror, there was one truth that remained, one truth the Varn could not erase. Error fails when faced with humanity. Burn the black. The human fleet moved deeper into unknown sectors. Every mission brought new risks, but also more victories. Each success made the Varn uneasy. Their fear weapon was losing power, and now came their most brutal choice. On the edge of Saturn's orbit sat a human research base on the moon. HFY scientists lived there with their families. They studied dark matter and deep space radiation. They had no weapons, no shields, no military units, only knowledge. Varn saw it as a target too easy to resist. If they destroyed it, the message would be clear: no one is safe, not even the thinkers, not even the children. The strike came without warning. Varn bombers released containers into the atmosphere. The sky filled with blue mist. People choked before they understood what had happened. It was a biological weapon, fast, invisible, unstoppable within. One day the base went silent, over 600 lives gone. No survivors, only data logs, footage, and ash. The footage reached Earth's command center before sunrise. Reed watched it with his fists clenched. The scene showed scientists helping each other, parents covering children, medics working with no protection. There was no panic, only bravery. Reed looked at his officers. No orders were spoken. They already knew what came next. This was not a strike for control. It was cruelty for message. But the message backfired. Within hours, Earth's entire fleet went on red alert. War factories activated blackout protocols. New battlecruisers left the docks 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Even school ships volunteered as supply carriers. One message echoed through every channel: Helios will be remembered. Commander Reed stood before a gathering of survivors and families. He did not promise peace. He did not speak of revenge. He only gave one truth: they think darkness will stop us, but we burn brighter. In the dark, he then revealed a new mission. A Varn communication relay sat hidden in a nebula called Sector 9. It linked half their fleets and delivered terror signals to dozens of worlds. Destroying it would blind the Varn and shake their control across entire systems. The mission was high risk. Defenses around the relay were stronger than anything faced so far. But it was the heart of their war machine, and hearts can break. Reed led the strike team himself. His ship, the Iron Resolve, moved under full cloak mode. No signals, no engine trails, no light. With him was Lieutenant Lane, a sharp strategist and expert in electronic warfare. She had grown up on Mars and lost her twin brother on Europa. She carried no medals, only purpose. Their plan was simple: enter the storm, disable the main grid, plant charges, leave before the Varn can respond. But nothing went as planned. The nebula was thicker than expected. Sensors failed, communications flickered. One support ship vanished in the mist. Then came the ambush. Varn ships emerged from the shadows like shadows themselves. Silent, swift, deadly. Fighting in the storm was chaos. No radar, no formation, only instinct and skill. Reed's ship was hit, sparks flew, engines sputtered. He ordered the crew to continue the mission while he created a distraction lane, took command of the second unit. She guided the strike team toward the relay core using only starlight and pulse scans. Each step felt like walking through smoke. Each breath carried tension. They reached the relay. It floated like a metal spider, alive with signals, covered in black plates, guarded by towers that turned slowly, as if searching for fear. Lane planted the charges with steady hands. She activated the countdown. 15 minutes, then she heard The sound a hum deep low rung. A Varn patrol spotted them. They were outnumbered, no cover, no escape lane stood her ground. She held a short blade and a signal jammer. One soldier beside her asked what they would do. Lane answered, "We don't run the fight." Was close, violent, raw. By the time the last Varn fell, Lane was bleeding from 2 wounds. But the charges were still ticking. She smiled and whispered for Helios. Then the explosion came from far beyond the nebula. Reed saw the light, bright, brief, brilliant. The relay was gone, but so was Lane. The price was heavy. But the result was louder than words. Across the Varn network, silence spread. Orders stopped, messages failed. Ships floated without command. The Empire stuttered on Earth. The footage of Lane's last stand became legend. Children learned her name. Colonies built statues. A single line was carved beneath her image. She didn't run. Reed returned to Earth with half his fleet. The rest stayed behind to support new allies, new species, new voices rising. A once silent galaxy had begun to speak. A council of 5 species contacted Earth for the first time. They had remained hidden for centuries. Now they wished to join the human coalition, not because humans had weapons, but because humans had something more powerful. They had defiance. Reed met with the council leaders on a neutral space station. He stood without armor, without guards, just a worn black coat and the fire of 1,000 fallen. They asked him what humans wanted from the war. He answered, "We want what the Varn fear most, a galaxy where fear holds no throne." As the meeting ended, a small child from one of the new species approached him. She looked up and asked in a quiet voice, "Will they come back?" Reed knelt beside her, his voice calm. "If they do, we'll be waiting." The sky beyond the station held no signs of Varn ships that day. Only stars, only light, and in the black humanity kept moving forward. One victory at a time, one truth louder than all weapons. Terror fails when faced with humanity. The fall of fear. The stars above the Varn systems no longer looked the same. What was once ruled by silence now carried the sound of movement. Human ships passed through sectors that once obeyed only the Varn. They brought light, food, medicine, fire. Not fear, not surrender, but hope. Commander Reed stood in the center of the bridge aboard Iron Resolve. The stars before him showed the path ahead. It was not a small mission. It was not a single target. It was the heart of the Varn Empire. Reed did not speak much during the long journey. He spent hours in silence, studying old data, mapping weak points, watching patterns, not for attack, but for something more important. The right moment. Behind him, the crew prepared without questions. They trusted Reed. They had seen what he had done. They had followed him through storms and fire, and they were ready to follow him into the Varn homeworld. Reports arrived from across the galaxy. Species once silent were rising. Some fought with sticks and stones. Some hid humans in deep caves. Some hacked into Varn systems and spread human messages. Every act, no matter how small, was a spark. The Varn had tried to drown the stars in fear, but the sparks were becoming fire. The Varn Council met in secret chambers. They no longer shouted with pride. They whispered with doubt. For the first time in centuries, they feared what might come next. Not a fleet, not a bomb, but a world where no one feared them anymore. Reed received an intercepted message from one of their commanders, a request to open talks. No threats, no demands, only confusion and desperation. The message ended with a line that said, "What do you want from us?" Reed did not respond. Instead, he called his officers to the war table, a hologram of the Varn homeworld spun slowly above them. Layers of defense, rings of ships, energy shields that covered entire cities. A fortress built not to protect life, but to protect power. Reed pointed to a weak spot near the southern pole, a shield generator, if disabled. The outer defenses would fall. If fallen, then ground troops could land, and if landed, then the Empire would face something it had never faced before. A war on its own soil. Captain Reed, a ground commander with sharp eyes and steady hands, stood at attention. He had fought on Europa. He had buried friends on Helios, and he had waited for this day. He asked Reed what the goal was. Reed said, "No more fear." The fleet began its final move. They did not cloak. They did not hide. They came in full force. Loud, clear-seen human warships formed a spear through the outer line. Missiles fired from long range. Drones broke enemy formations. Heavy cruisers used themselves as shields for landing crafts. The Varn fired back. Bright flashes filled the sky. The noise of battle shook space like thunder. But the humans kept moving. They had learned to fight in the dark. They had learned to bleed and keep standing. As the main fleet drew attention, smaller teams moved beneath the chaos. One of them, led by Captain Reed, reached the southern pole. Ice plains stretched for miles. Sharp winds cut through the air, but the shield generator towered ahead. Varn guards appeared from underground bunkers, firing energy bursts, moving in formation, but the humans did not break. Captain Reed charged forward. He moved fast, low, precise. His team used smoke grenades and pulse rifles. They cleared the path, reached the tower, set charges, but something went wrong. A sniper hidden in the hills struck one of the engineers. He fell with the remote in his hand. Broken. Captain Reed did not wait. He ran into the tower, climbed the metal spine, placed his hand on the core, and pulled the manual trigger. The explosion lit up the ice. The shield cracked, and above an orbit red gave the final command move. Inhuman dropships entered the planet's surface like rain. Tanks rolled through old roads. Troops took positions in streets never touched by war. The Varn capital trembled. Their rulers looked to the sky and saw fire, not just ships, but spirit, and for the first time they understood the thing they had tried to break was unbreakable. A voice echoed across their emergency frequencies. It was Commander Reed. You built an empire on fear. Now you face those who do not fear. You lay down your arms or learn what it means to fight the living. The battle lasted 5 hours. It could have lasted longer, but something strange happened. The Varn surrendered one by one. Their ships powered down. One by one, their soldiers dropped weapons. One by one, their generals knelt, not from defeat, but from disbelief. They had used terror for centuries, but it had failed. It had broken. And now they had nothing left to use. Reed walked through the burned gate of their capital, without armor, without helmet, only his coat and his name. He entered the chamber of leaders. They stood silent, eyes down, powerless. One of them asked, "What will you do with us?" Reed looked at them without hate, without fire, only truth. You will rebuild. You will not rule. You will live under the memory of what fear cost you. He left the chamber without waiting for response outside. The streets filled with former prisoners, aliens who had never spoken freely, children who had never seen sunlight, mothers who had never felt peace. They looked at Reed not as a conqueror, but as proof that even in the darkest place, the light of resistance can shine. That day the Varn world changed, not by bombs, but by belief, and across the stars one truth became law, not written in books, but in memory. Terror fails when faced with humanity. The war ends here. The sky above the Varn homeworld no longer held darkness. Where once their ships floated like blades in shadow, now hung silence. Human banners waved above once forbiddens. Ground-tired soldiers sat beside alien children. Fires burned not with war, but with warmth. Commander Reed walked through the remains of the capital with quiet steps. No cheers followed him, no parades, only soft voices, only rebuilding hands, only the quiet weight of what had been won and what had been lost. The war was over, but the work was not. Earth's message to the galaxy had not been written with paper. It had been carved in blood, sacrifice, courage, and truth. Now it had to become something real. Across the galaxy, planets that once feared to speak now raised their own voices. They sent letters of alliance. They painted walls with human colors. They sang songs using human words, not to praise, but to join the human coalition formed a new agreement with 12 species. They did not call it an empire. They called it accord, not ruled, not forced, just chosen. The first meeting of the accord was not held on Earth. It was held on Europa, rebuilt from ash on the same land where the first Varn strike had fallen. Families returned to Europa with eyes filled with memory. Children planted trees where craters once stood. Engineers raised buildings where no hope had remained. Reed stood on the central platform where leaders of the Accord gathered. He wore the same black coat from the final battle. No badges, no armor, only presence. They gave him a chance to speak. He looked at them, and then at the stars above. We did not begin this war. We did not ask for it. We answered a question asked with fire. And now we give our own answer. No one rules with fear again. Not here, not anywhere. He stepped back. No applause came, just agreement after the speech. Reed returned to solitude. He did not stay in command. He did not take power. He left it in the hands of those who would build. He visited the graves of those lost. Lane Reed, the miners of Red Point, the scientists of Helios, each name carved into dark stone, each stone carrying the small light that never faded. Child stood near one of the graves. She was not human, but her eyes were filled with the same wonder. She asked him why the war had happened, why some beings chose to bring terror instead of peace. Reed knelt beside her and said, because they forgot something. They forgot that people fight harder when they have something worth protecting. And they forgot that fear only works if the heart allows it. Ours did not. She nodded and touched the stone. Her fingers lit the small light again. In deep space, new stations were built, joint projects between humans and former Varn engineers. Old weapons were turned into defense beacons. Ships once made for conquest now carried medicine and food. The last Varn general still alive visited Earth under a peace banner. He met with leaders of the Accord. He did not beg. He did not lie. He only asked to be part of the future. He said, we believed no one would ever stand. You proved us wrong. Teach us how to live without fear. The council agreed under one condition: no throne, no armies, only work and memory. Varn agreed. Years passed, but the memory of the war remained sharp. Schools taught it not with glory, but with truth. Paintings showed not just victory, but struggle. Songs carried not pride, but purpose. Commander Reed never returned to public life. He lived on a small colony near Neptune. He worked as a builder. He helped raise greenhouses. He spoke little, but people knew his face and greeted him with quiet respect. One morning, as the sun rose over the frozen hills, a young officer arrived. She carried a message. A new crisis was rising in a far sector. No war yet, but tension. The Accord wanted guidance, not orders. Just a voice that had seen the worst and chosen the best. Reed listened. He took a deep breath. He looked at the sky once more. He said, tell them this: we do not build weapons first. We build bridges, but if they try fear again, tell them what happened the last time. The officer nodded. She left without asking more, and Reed stood alone watching the light. No banners, no alarms, only peace held together by what had been proven, that when terror came, humanity stood. When others bowed, humanity rose. And when fear was offered, humanity answered with something stronger. Not rage, not hatred, but the will to survive, the will to protect, the will to remain human, even in the blackest dark. That truth echoed through every world, every station. Every voice that had once whispered now spoke freely. They all remembered the message: terror fails when faced with humanity. The end.